And then bring your awareness to the area of your face and soften and relax all the muscles in the face. The mouth and jaw soft and relaxed. And all the muscles around the eyes soft and relaxed. In this way, allowing the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. And then we can take 3 slow, deep breaths, maintaining awareness of sensations throughout the body as you breathe. And then allow your breathing to settle into its natural rhythm. Not trying to control or manipulate the breath in any way. Simply allowing the breathing to flow naturally and effortlessly. And then give yourself permission for the duration of this short meditation to let go of any hopes or fears, worries or concerns about the past or the future. Letting go of all of these things and simply allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment. Simply focusing on the sensations of the breath throughout the body. Wherever you most easily notice any sensations associated with the breathing. you notice that you've become distracted from the breath, then no need to get upset or frustrated. Simply relax and then release the distraction and very gently return to focusing on the breath. Simply keep coming back to the breath every time you notice that you've become distracted. Maintaining an ongoing flow of mindfulness of the sensations of the breath throughout the body. Wherever you most easily notice any sensations associated with the breath. And then for a short time we can think about our motivation for coming here for this 2-day Vipasana retreat. Why do you want to attend these 2 days? And try to set the best possible motivation for coming here for these 2 days. And try to expand your motivation out to include others. Not only coming here these 2 days for your own benefit, but so that you can help benefit those around you. Keeping this motivation in mind, we can slowly end this meditation and begin our discussions together. So let's begin by looking at ways in which we distort reality, how we have a distorted view of reality. And there are at least 4 ways in which we distort reality. The first is that we tend to see things around us as rather stable and unchanging. You know, this laptop is more or less the same laptop that was here yesterday. It'll be the same laptop here tomorrow. So we tend to see things as rather stable. But actually, of course, science has proven that everything is changing moment by moment. That at the atomic and subatomic level, there's just flux and change all the time. That this is the nature of reality, is that things are constantly changing. But we don't see that, mainly due to the limitation of our faculties. And rather, we see things as rather stable. And we interact with things in this way. And that's often why we become quite frustrated when things actually change, because we're not sort of expecting that change. Suddenly something changes. And we're sort of frustrated and upset because we're expecting it to sort of be there and not really change. So this holding on to things as being stable creates a lot of problems in our life in terms of frustration, disappointment, and so forth. Now, of course, intellectually, we probably all accept the fact that everything's changing moment by moment. But here, we're talking about experientially. How do we experientially see things? And I think experientially, we tend to see things as somewhat stable. And this, of course, is out of sync with reality. And the Buddhist assertion is, whenever we're out of sync with reality, this easily leads to mental afflictions and suffering. So this is one way in which we have a distortion of reality. At least experientially, instinctively. Another way in which we distort reality is that we often see our experiences, particularly our pleasant experiences, in the nature of happiness. And thereby we hope that these pleasant experiences are going to somehow satisfy us, fulfill us. And of course, when they never do, we get frustrated and disappointed. So another Buddhist assertion is that this is a distortion, that our experiences, particularly our pleasant experiences, are not really in the nature of happiness. Intellectually, we may appreciate that, because intellectually we understand that these pleasant experiences are just temporary, transient. They'll finish. Intellectually we know that, but instinctively, experientially, we sort of grasp onto them and hope that they're going to last, hope that they're somehow going to satisfy us and fulfill us. And of course, when they never do, frustration, disappointment, and so forth follows. So again, experientially, instinctively, we have this sense, or that these pleasant experiences are in the nature of happiness. The third way in which we distort reality is related to how we see ourselves as a person. Now we tend to instinctively feel that there's what's called an autonomous self here. That somewhere here is a me, and this me is something more than just the body and the mind. That there's something more than just the body and the mind here. There's a third thing, this me, that has its own sort of autonomous existence. It sort of exists within itself. Intellectually, we may appreciate there's no such self, but instinctively we have this sense that, and that's how we behave, you know. We often say things like, I have a body, I have a mind, as if there's a third thing, something other than the body and the mind, the me, this autonomous me that has a body and mind. And that's how we often see ourselves existing. And again, the Buddhist assertion is that this is a distortion, that we do not exist in this autonomous way as an autonomous self. There's another distortion. Is also with respect to ourselves and the world. Instinctively, we see, or we believe, there's an independent me here and an independent objective world out there. And then we relate to that world in that way. But again, the Buddhist assertion is that this is a false view of reality, and that actually there's no independent me and independent world. There's only an interdependent world which we are part of. And intellectually we may sort of understand that or appreciate this idea of interdependency. But experientially, instinctively, that's not how we see ourselves in the world. Instinctively, we see there's an independent me and an independent objective world there, and we relate to that world in that way. And the Buddhist assertion is that this is a false view, a distortion. And because we relate to the world in that way, that causes mental afflictions like attachment, aversion, and jealousy, leading to suffering. So these are the four main distortions, the four main ways in which we distort reality. And we're going to be looking at and practicing in this Vipasana retreat meditations to overcome all of those four distortions. This is a very brief introduction. Is there any questions about this that we're not sure of? Of course, I'm going to go into each of these in detail.
I just didn't understand the difference between the third one and the fourth one.
Yeah. In the third one, we have a sense of a me that is something more than the body and the mind. You know, stands apart. Whereas this is a little bit more subtle distortion. Because you can eliminate this distortion and still be believing this. So they're very closely related, of course, but this is a little bit more subtle idea, and we're going to look at that. That we can sort of start to eliminate this false sense of me and still believe there's an independent world. So it's a sort of degree of subtlety. Any other questions? Again, this is just a brief introduction so far. We're going to look at each of those, of course, in detail as we go into the practice. Okay? So these are some ways that we distort reality, and we're going to be looking at each of those in some detail in the coming 2 days, and we're going to be looking at and practicing meditations, Vipassana practices to overcome all of those 4 ways of distortion. What I'd like to do now is to have a look at how these distortions actually lead to mental afflictions and suffering. So for that, we'll need one of our handouts. So we'll need the suffering and its causes chart, this one here. And what we've got in this is the mechanism or the process how distortions lead to mental afflictions like attachment, aversion, and so forth, and that leads to suffering. And this handout is particularly based on this distortion, this false view of seeing an independent me and an independent objective world. So we're going to be looking at that process based on this one. So let's have a look at it now in a little bit more detail. In the first step there we see it says seed of ignorance. Ignorance here is a word for this distortion. Is like ignorance is our false grasping onto reality. Seed just means habit. So we have a habit of this distorting reality. We have a habit of grasping onto things in a wrong way. And then we have here what's called mistaken dualistic appearance. What that means is when we look out on the world, everything that we see appears to exist completely independent of us. So there appears to be what's called subject-object duality. There appears to be duality. There appears to be an independent subjective me and an independent objective world out there. Everything that's ever appeared to us has appeared to us in this way. So and that's the only way we've seen things. So there's no reason for us to question these appearances. But these appearances, according to this view we're looking at now, is deceiving us. That things are not existing in the way they appear. Even though this world appears to exist independent of us, it in fact does not exist in this way. Hence, mistaken dualistic appearance. That things mistakenly appear to be independent of us. So that's what the word mistaken dualistic appearance means. So of course everything that we've seen has always appeared to us in this way, and we have the habit of believing that. So here the ignorance is grasping onto independent world. So we have the habit of believing that, and so because we have that habit of believing it, whenever something appears to us, we never question appearances. We just accept. Yep, that laptop's there, independent of me. So that's the second step. Ignorance. So ignorance here is this active grasping onto things in this way. Now, every time we experience something, we have what's called feeling, a mental factor called feeling that is in every experience. And here's a classic case of how terminology can create some confusion. Because the original Buddhist teachings were coming from Pali and Sanskrit, the ancient Indian languages. And the terms there were very precise in meaning. But then when these words were translated into English, often there's no word in English that has that precise meaning. And then sometimes that word in English has other meanings in general conversation. So sometimes when we see the word in English, we don't get a very clear understanding of what the original term was. And this is an example. The word feeling, of course, for us, feeling generally means emotion. In Buddhism, when you see the word feeling, it doesn't mean emotion. Feeling is a translation of a Sanskrit word Vedana. And this is simply experiencing things as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So here, when we're talking about feeling, we're talking about simply experiencing things as either being pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And neutral just means neither pleasant or unpleasant. So let's say we're looking at these flowers. Those flowers appear to exist independent of me. I have the habit of believing that. So I never question that belief, that habit, and I just automatically accept, yep, those flowers are there independent of me. So let's say when I'm looking at those flowers, I'm having a pleasant experience when I'm looking at those flowers. That pleasant experience, together with the belief that these flowers are independent of me, will naturally lead me to assume there must be some attractive quality there that's causing my pleasant feeling. So we're going to see these flowers as inherently attractive. There's some attractiveness there. This, according to Buddhism, is a misconception. So that's step 3. Or, if I look at those flowers and I have an unpleasant experience, together with the belief that those flowers are independent of me, will naturally lead me to assume there must be some unattractive quality there that's causing my unpleasant experience. We'll see them as inherently unattractive. Or if I'm having a neutral experience, there must be some neutral qualities there causing my neutral experience. Once we've got to step 3, then step 4 easily follows. Again, let's say I'm looking at these flowers and I'm having a pleasant experience. And I'm naturally assuming there must be some attractive quality there that's causing my pleasant experience. I like pleasant experiences. I want pleasant experiences. Those flowers seem to be causing my pleasant experience. I want those flowers. That's an attachment. Or if I'm having an unpleasant experience, I don't like unpleasant experiences. I don't want unpleasant experiences. Those flowers seem to be causing my unpleasant experience. Get them out of here. Aversion. Or if I'm having a neutral experience, that's just going to reinforce my belief that those flowers are independent of me, which of course is ignorance. Here, usually you'll see a different word than ignorance, confusion. Confusion doesn't mean here, are they flowers or not? Confusion is just confused about how they exist. So confusion here is just another word for ignorance. It's simply reinforcing my false belief those flowers are independent of me. So these mental afflictions come on that basis, and then these lead to all the other mental afflictions, and these are what's driving our behaviour, our actions. And the Buddhist assertion is that every action we do, motivated by one of these mental afflictions, has a consequence, a result. And the result of our actions, and here in the chart you see it, the word in English is suffering, but the original word is dukkha. And this is another classic example of where terminology can be confusing. Because here we're talking about all of our experiences. This word suffering here, which is a translation of dukkha, is not the same meaning as we normally think of the word suffering. When we hear the word suffering, of course, for us, it means some sort of unpleasant, painful physical or mental experience. But here this word has a much greater meaning than that. This includes our suffering experiences, our pleasurable experiences, all of our experiences. So this is the original word dukkha. So we have to be careful in Buddhism when we see the word suffering, that if it's a translation of this word, then it has a very expansive, broad meaning. But basically, what we're saying is that our actions, motivated by mental afflictions, the consequence is our experiences, which translated as dukkha, originally dukkha, but translated as suffering. So this is how the process, this distortion of reality, leads to our mental afflictions and leads to our experiences. This is the process. So, is there any questions about that process?
Yeah.
Anything not clear? Yeah.
If you can focus, I don't understand exactly the suffering and dukkha. If you can a little bit focus.
Yeah. Okay.
On that.
So here, our actions, will simplify, can either be harmful actions or beneficial actions, virtuous actions. The assertion is if we engage in a harmful action, then the result is suffering. And if it's a virtuous, beneficial action, the result is some happiness experience. Both our suffering and happiness experiences, in fact all of our experiences collectively, is dukkha. So what we're saying here is that all of our experiences, whether they're our happiness experiences or our suffering experiences all come from our behavior. But even here, our happiness experiences, our pleasurable experiences, are still not in the nature of happiness, really, because they're just temporary, transient experiences that finish. So another word that sometimes people use to translate dukkha is unsatisfactory. And so we can sort of see that, of course, our painful experiences are unsatisfactory. We don't want them. But even our pleasant experiences are unsatisfactory because they never last. They're just temporary. In fact, all of our experiences are like this. And the deepest meaning of dukkha is that no matter what experiences we're having, we're stuck in this state that there's always a potential for some sort of suffering to arise in our life, even if there's not one now. And the reason being is our mind is contaminated by the mental afflictions, meaning as long as we've got anger and jealousy and craving, anxiety and all these things in our mind, there's always a potential for suffering to arise in our life. And that, in that sense, our life is unsatisfactory because there's always that potential. And that's the deepest meaning of this word dukkha. That's really the deepest meaning. And that's why sometimes it's translated as unsatisfactory. That the human condition is unsatisfactory for those three reasons. So dukkha, it's extremely difficult. There's no word in English that encompasses all those meanings, but that's what dukkha means.
Maybe it's too early, I don't know, so maybe we'll talk about it. But this whole thing of the mistaken dualistic appearance, that there is a me in the world, so it's not black and white. I mean, I think there are levels of dependence. So maybe these flowers, there is some interdependence between the flowers and myself.
Yeah.
But if I have a garden and I have flowers that I planted and I water and I nourish, there is a higher level of dependence between the flowers and me. And maybe a tree in the woods, 2 kilometers from here, there's a very low level of... There is some level, perhaps, because I breathed some oxygen to the tree. There is, but a very, very subtle level of...
Yeah, we're going to be looking at this in detail later, so maybe we'll leave it till then. It's coming, I think, either late this afternoon or tomorrow morning. We're going to be talking about the idea of dependency and what it really means, so that's coming.
Okay.
Can you explain the difference between seed of ignorance and ignorance?
Seed is just habit, and this is active, is manifest. Okay. So you can have another analogy is you can have a seed of anger, meaning the habit of getting angry, and then you're actually angry. So one is dormant and one is manifest.
I wonder, you say that suffering is not a good translation of dukkha.
Correct.
Why do you use it?
Because I use it because the early translators used it and it sort of stuck.
No, but it's misleading because if I understood you correctly, what you say is forget the word suffering. Assume we use the word dukkha. So dukkha, you say, it means experience. This is so in a way.
Well, it describes it describes the condition we find ourselves in.
No, but this is misleading. Am I wrong? Because it's not suffering. You mean something else, but you already missing a word. That's what you're trying to tell us.
Yeah, so far I haven't found a good word for dukkha in English.
So let's say we decide it's kukuriko, for example, which has no meaning. Okay, so this kukuriko, if I understand well, is closing a circle with stage 1 or 2, because otherwise it's tautology. Say we are ignorance. We are ignorance. We are doing this, and this is bring us to this state of mind, which is including what we think is suffering, what we think is pleasure, and what we think is neutral. This is our everyday feelings. Am I right?
So this is just describing the condition we find ourselves in, yes. And why are we there? Why are we stuck here? Of course, you know...
And since we are stuck there, we are again starting from stage number 1.
Yeah.
Circle, that's what you're going to
circle. This is
Since we are in dukkha,
Yeah.
we go back to seed of ignorance, to ignorance, blah, 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 blah. Am I right?
Because we're stuck here and we have the seed of ignorance, then yes, the whole process continues. So therefore we need to break the cycle by breaking this. This is where to break it. So that's what the Vipasana practice is all about. Vipassana practice is to cut it.
To cut this circle that we are in.
That's right. So the whole goal of Vipassana practice is to stop this cycling. And to stop it, we have to go to the root cause. And the root cause is this. So Vipassana practice is to overcome this. If we overcome this, we overcome this, the result. So this is to break the cycle here. That's the Buddhist assertion.
However, suffering can help you to gain motivation to come out of your situation.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It's not actually a circle.
Sorry?
So it's not actually a circle.
It's not a circle.
No, I mean, referring to what he said.
No, it's because of these steps, we're stuck in a cycle. And you're right, is that the first thing that can motivate us to get out of the cycle is to understand we're stuck in this cycle. So in fact, that's the very first thing the Buddha taught. The very first thing the Buddha taught after achieving enlightenment is this. He said, understand you're stuck in this state. And try to understand that it's coming from this, and that if you eliminate this, you can eliminate this. And so often in Buddhism we talk about the 5 qualities of suffering. Because by recognizing this, it motivates us to do something, to go beyond it. So yes, suffering can be a motivator. In fact, many people only enter into some sort of spiritual practice because of suffering. If the life is going along too easy, there's no motivation to do anything. So generally people only do things when they have to, when they're forced to. And it's usually when they have some sort of traumatic event